Tonight is Republican Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado here on set. Thank you for being here in New York with us, Congressman. You have said previously that you couldn't vote for Trump if he was a convicted felon. But now the idea that this case, this documents case, is going to be pushed back, or at least right now it's scheduled to start in mid-May. That's after your state's primary. What do you do?
Well, I don't publicly take any position on who I'm going to vote for anyway, but I will not endorse probably until after the Colorado primary.
But could you support Trump with the idea of not knowing whether or not he is going to be a convicted felon that you said you wouldn't support?
Yeah, as I said, I'm not going to support anybody for a period of time.
Do you believe it's in the best interest for voters if they go to cast their ballots and Trump hasn't gone to trial yet?
No, I don't think it's in the best interest of voters. I think there should be some knowledge. I think the facts that come out of trial are going to be relevant to their decision. I think the idea that he may be convicted, although I think a lot of this generates a lot of sympathy at this point among Republican primary voters.
We've seen how his poll numbers have gone up. His team was arguing to push this past the November 2024 election. Do you think more than a year is enough time to be able to bring that to trial and to have that case, given you're a former federal prosecutor?
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable trial date. I also suspect we haven't heard the last about continuances. If one of his attorneys decides to withdraw, then you've got to have a security clearance for another attorney. You've got to have another attorney get up to speed. So there's a lot of different ways that a possible continuance could play out.
Yeah. He also just got this target letter in January 6th. He hasn't been indicted yet. We're waiting to see if he ultimately will be. But if he is, do you think those would be the most serious charges that he's facing?
I think all the charges are serious, depending on how serious a jury takes them. But I do think that the documents case is probably a very serious case against him. I just don't know enough about the January 6th charges at this point.
You were there that day. You voted to certify President Biden's election, I should note, when some of your Republican colleagues did not. I mean, do you believe that there's accountability for Trump if he is charged in this case?
Well, not only was I there, I was sitting on the floor as glass was breaking and having no idea really whether there were 10 people outside or 1,000 people outside. I think that the evidence has to be very clear that President Trump was behind what those rioters did. Not just that he could have stopped it at some point, but that he actually had the motivation and had some kind of conversations with them, which I don't think we know about just yet.
And what about obstructing an official proceeding? We know that's an avenue that Jack Smith has been pursuing. Trump's mindset about knowing that he lost that election and still pushing ahead with the crazy avenues that he did try.
Well, first, I'm not sure that his mindset was that he lost the election. And secondly, there's certainly a lot of people around him that told him he lost the election. But secondly, did he actually cause those rioters to come up from the mall and storm the Capitol? That's the issue I think they have to prove at the trial.
Given you were there that day, what do you think when you hear how not only how Trump describes January 6th, but whitewashing it, saying it was a love fest, saying that they were peaceful patriots there? Ron DeSantis today saying it wasn't an insurrection.
Yeah, I don't believe it was an insurrection either. I guarantee you that 90% of those people own guns in their home, and not one of them brought a gun to the Capitol. It was a riot. It was disruptive. It stopped the proceedings for a matter of hours. Calling it an insurrection to me is really rhetoric that rises above the actual facts.
Well, we know that there were weapons. Some of them were stashed in Virginia, I believe, with Proud Boys and whatnot. But from what you've seen, do you believe that Trump is being treated fairly by the special counsel?
That's the real question, I think, that Republican primary voters are going to have to decide. We're talking about, and I hear this from my constituents in Colorado, we're talking about potentially 4 different indictments in 4 different states. And John Gotti didn't have 4 indictments. Al Capone didn't have 4 indictments. And Donald Trump is not a crime family leader. He was president of the United States. So I think that there's really going to be a pushback among voters as to the level of scrutiny that Donald Trump is under.
Well, I know you disagree with the New York case, for example, the Manhattan case. You don't think that one's... But the other aspects of this, I mean, the documents case... You have told me before you believe that was self-inflicted. I mean, how much legal baggage is too much legal baggage, do you think, for Republican primary voters?
Well, I think the key is the Department of Justice, and I was both at the Department of Justice and at the U.S. Attorney's Office during my time as a federal prosecutor. I think the Department of Justice has to figure out which is their best case and bring it. And if you have, 7 different states where President Trump was challenging the electoral count, you can't have 7 different district attorneys or more from each state bringing charges. I think that looks excessive.
Last question. On Capitol Hill, we saw this effort this week at this idea of Kevin McCarthy having to deny that he promised Trump he would bring a vote to the House floor to expunge Trump's 2 impeachments, which I'm not even sure if you can actually do that. Do you think that's a wise move?
Oh, it's probably wise for the Republican base. It's not wise in terms of constitutional history. It's not wise in terms of precedent that it sets. The Senate expunged when they voted not to impeach, and that's. But
really... it's still on the record. I mean, would it even pass in a Republican-controlled House?
But what record? You don't go to a courthouse to look up a record. In this case, it's just a public record. He was impeached by the House. He was acquitted by the Senate.
Yeah. So do you think that Kevin McCarthy should not pursue that?
Oh, I don't care. I mean, I will vote for it because it's.
You would vote to expunge it?
Oh, sure.
Why?
Because it makes no difference. And there's a whole lot of Republican voters who are sitting out there saying to themselves, why should President Trump have been, why should he have this on his record? The record's going to exist one way or the other.
But why would you vote to expunge it if you're saying you don't even know if it's constitutional to do that?
Well, it's not unconstitutional. What I'm saying is there's nowhere in the Constitution where it talks about expungement. So it is just a matter of, it's almost like a sense of Congress. We're having a vote on the sense of Congress that he should not have been impeached. I voted against both impeachments.
Congressman, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And for more on this, I want to also bring in